I love buying secondhand, pre-owned, whatever you call it, thrifted, pre-loved yarn. And there are lots of places that you can buy it. It can be a great way of getting a bargain. So let me take you through my best tips on where to buy online, in store, and also some other options of how you can get affordable yarn through your own networks or through unraveling things as well. Let's dig into online first. One of my current favourite places to spend time down a rabbit hole looking for bargain yarn is online in reseller spaces like Vinted. They also have some on Depop, but personally I think Vinted is the best place for it at the moment. And here are some tips I have for you on doing that. You can search through all of the categories and get from hobbies and crafts all the way through to knitting and needle crafts and yarn through that way. Or you can just start at the top of the home search and type in things like yarn, skein, hank, wool, cake. You can be quite generic with your search and do things like 500 grams of cream wool and see what that brings back. Usually a really nice selection of undyed proper wool. And you can also be really specific, so you could try searching by the country of the yarn that you want or the yarn manufacturer. So this is part of a bigger blog post that I've pulled together, and then there I've given examples of what happened when I searched for like Rowan yarn or hand dyed skein. There's some other good tips. So if you're a massive fan of hand dyed yarn, type that into the search within Vinted, Depop, or another reseller. But I really think Vinted is the best one at the moment, and lots of people are catching on to the fact that there's yarn on Vinted, and it's just what they populate on my home feed every day now because they know that's what I'm searching for. So there are really easy ways of looking for yarn on Vinted, and there are some great things on there to go and buy. But here are some extra tips on what to look for when you find a seller with stuff that you like. So if you find a listing on Vinted that you really love the look of, the example that I'm showing on screen now is for Woolly Mammoth Fibre Company. It's dyed in Northern Ireland. It's beautiful dyer, and this is for 5 skeins at £70. Now the things to look at are that one, the postage is only from £2.29, so that's very reasonable, and that's because Vinted get a bulk postage deal with the postage offers that they have for the people. So whether here in the UK that might be Yodel or it might be Every, but it's generally really affordable postage. The next thing to look at is whoever is selling this also has said that you can make an offer to them. So I could probably go in and offer £60 for this and possibly get it for £60, but I know it's worth 70. The other things to look at is over on the left, you can see that the member has got 12 other items. And this is a really good idea, is if they've got other items, then you can see below that it says shop their bundles and you could get up to 30% off. If you then hit that create bundle button in the middle, the one that's in the teal colour, that will take you through to their other items, and they might have lots of other yarns that you could bundle together and get 30% off the total amount. This is what makes Vinted a little bit special, is it's really easy to do more bulk buys of yarns and get really good deals on it. And I would tend to say that people that are selling yarn on Vinted, by and large, I haven't had any bad experiences with it. It's come through well, it's not had moths in it, it's been totally fine. People tend to say if it's coming from a pet-free, smoke-free home. I've had no issues with that whatsoever. So I am a big fan of buying from Vinted, and I think there are some really great ways of maximising your money with that sales system. The bundles one is particularly good, and checking, because if a member has got a yarn that you really love, then the chances are that they might have more yarn that you really love. So for this one, I wasn't specifically searching for woolly mammoth fibre, but when I saw it in the lineup for, I think I just searched for skeins of yarn, I knew that this was woolly mammoth fibre and I was interested in how much it was. Now, within the blog post, I've done the calculations because you might be listening to this thinking £70 fee for 5 skeins of yarn is an awful lot of money, and it is, but that's half the price it would be if I was buying it straight from the woolly mammoth website with postage. So this on face value looks like a lot of money, but actually this is an absolute steal. This is 50% off the value once you would have it posted through like a primary sales. So Vinted is a great way of doing it. It's also a safe way of doing it because your items are buyer protected and the money goes straight out of your account, and the person at the other end only gets it when you've said that there are no issues and that the sale has gone through and the stuff has arrived and there are no problems with it. So there's a certain amount of buyer protection with it that I really like. I also said that Depop is an option. There is some yarn on Depop, but not a lot. Vinted, I think, is the main reseller site for yarn, and it's growing daily. There's also fibre on there if you're a spinner. There's all sorts of stuff. So actually, I would say go and have a look. There are loads of knitting books in there, crochet books. Before I started recording on this, I managed to get an old vintage crochet book for £1. So there's all sorts on there, well worth taking a look at for pre-owned yarn and other crafty bits and pieces. Another great online resource for pre-owned yarn, second-hand yarn, is eBay. One, because the search facility within eBay is really good. You can search down by material, location, what price point you want, whether it's on an auction or not, which can be a really good way of getting absolute bargains on the yarn front. And one of the things that I quite like is that eBay is a reseller space for a lot of small local yarn shops. They sell online through eBay. So if you're after quite a specific yarn, quite often eBay is where I will go to first, because I know that it's got a range of different sellers on there and that mostly it's going to be brand new with tags if I want, but also that's one of the search filters that you can put into eBay. So again, I've got a slide for you to have a look at, and these are some of the things that I would look for on an eBay listing. This is an auction listing that I've put up, so it's currently on at £10.78, which if that was going to sell for £10.78 for 150 grams of woolmizer, that's a really good deal, even when you add £3.38 for your postage in there. But like Vinted, what I would also suggest doing is looking at the seller's other items, and I've shown you below what this seller also had up for sale. There's a lot of woolmizer. So if you were doing a search for woolmizer, you might be able to create a postage deal or negotiate a bundle deal with this seller online or another seller. They might also tell you no, which is fair game, but it can be a way of getting yarn at a really affordable price from one person. Again, you've got good protection on eBay, and the payment's easy, and it's just easy to do business, and you can see in advance whether somebody's got good feedback or not, and you can contact them if you have to. So eBay is another great option. I think more so if you want to be really specific about the yarn that you want. If you're after a bargain, then I think Vinted is a better option. But if you're after something very specific, then I would say eBay is a good place to start. Now, the next option for online purchasing of second-hand yarn is Facebook. Like or loathe it, there are two ways that I would search for yarn within Facebook. The first is to become a member of yarn reseller groups. I am a member of one. It's UK based, but they sell further afield, and it's individual sellers, and it's called Yarn Snobs UK. And the other way is through Facebook Marketplace, and they've both got their pros and cons. So through a group, you tend to get people that really know what it is that they're selling. They know the value of it. They will list very clearly whether it's a smoke-free, pet-free home, how it's been stored, and those sellers are more likely to have really looked after the yarn that they're then trying to sell on. Again, people are usually open to offers. The photography is usually decent, and you can get to see the labels, and they will list out what the blend of the fibres is, what the meterage is, how many grams it is. So again, if you know exactly what it is that you want, finding yarn on some of those Facebook groups is a really good idea. What I would say is, I think Facebook is pretty good at telling you within Marketplace and groups whether it's in your location or not. So ideally search for a group that is in your country, so you can kind of reduce the shipping costs, because none of us really like paying for shipping for the things that are coming through. With Facebook Marketplace, again, it's really easy to change your search filter, so you can search from within 5 miles, which means that you might be able to find stuff that's very localized to you and you can go and collect. The beauty of that is it's kind of an in-between going in store and being online, in that you don't part with your money until you've seen the yarn, which means you're able to inspect it before you part with your cash. That can be quite helpful. It's not anything that I've ever done, but if you are buying a lot, like a jumper quantity of yarn, and it's local to you, I could see that that would be helpful before you hand over, 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe more pounds for yarn. What I would say with Facebook Marketplace is sometimes the communication from the sellers isn't great. That's an issue that I've had with Facebook Marketplace in the past. Again, I've not bought yarn through Facebook Marketplace, but I do have a little search every now and then to see what's coming up. Also, some people on Facebook Marketplace would be willing to post, but then it's not really set up for that in the same way as some of the other reseller sites or Facebook groups, where it's just accepted that you will post the yarn. So that's one of the things to be aware of and navigate well. No matter where you're buying your yarn online though, what I would say is I would tend only towards things that have got a label, so I know what the blend is, I know what I'm paying for, and I know that the quality is right. And you're perfectly within your rights, if somebody hasn't photographed the label properly, to contact them and ask for a better photo of the label, which will allow you to see the grams and meterage. Quite often you get people reselling, might be for friends and family. It could sadly be because there's been a death in the family and they're cleaning out wool, yarn, craft supplies from a loved one, and they don't know what they're selling. So in that instance, it might be worth just pinging them a quick message to ask them to photograph the label more properly. But also, and this is a bit wrong, but sometimes that's where the bargains lie, because people just want rid of whatever it is that they've got to get rid of. Another top tip that I've got for you is that if you find stuff online, yarn, that you think is a really good price and you know exactly what it is and it is a really good price, don't wait. Don't hesitate, because you'll wait 10 minutes and it will be sold. It's not going to sit there for days, weeks, months on end. That's highly unlikely. So if you see the right thing at the right price, just go for it and buy it. Stuff does not hang around quickly. Like for a long time on Vinted, it moves quickly. Let's talk about some places that are in-store, bricks and mortar places that you might find yarn. In the UK, we would call them charity shops. Elsewhere, they're known as thrift stores. But basically, it's where people have donated goods and you can go in and buy them, usually at a greatly discounted price. Some people have great luck finding yarn in charity shops, thrift stores. I do not. My local ones never have really good yarn. Occasionally I will find little bits and pieces, but not enough to do an entire project with. What I tend to find is that in most charity shops, they have a couple of baskets of crafting supplies, and you might get little bits and pieces in there, but I really never have much luck with finding yarn in charity shops. But I do find other things, which I will talk about in the next section. Like I say though, other people have great luck. As I said with the online side of things, if it's unlabelled, then I tend not to buy it. But if you go into the blog post that I have linked below, then I take you through how you can look at do a burn test to assess what it is if it didn't have a label. and also some of the pitfalls. If it's a cone of yarn and the labelling inside the cone of yarn, it might not tell you what the weight is, but there might be reference to a number and NM, and I've given you directions on that and what that might be as well. So beyond charity shops and thrift stores for finding second-hand yarn, I would also say look up, do an internet search to see whether there is a scrap store near you. I have one near me in Stoke-on-Trent in Staffordshire, and that has got loads and loads of yarn in it, some labelled, some not, all sorts of stuff. A lot of it is vintage and in some fairly decent amounts. The Stoke scrap store also have bagged things up in like colours or like yarns. If it's art yarn, then they've got some of that together. But they had like drawers full of it and open units full of it that you can go and have a look through. As with any kind of charity shop, scrap storing, the more often you go, the more likely you are to find the things that you're looking for. But if you go once in a blue moon, it's highly unlikely that you're going to come across yarn treasure. But if you keep on going in, you're more likely to find something. But go to that blog post and have a look at how you can tell what a cone likely has for weight of yarn, and how you can do a burn test if you buy something from a charity shop or a scrap store that is unlabelled, how you can test what it is that you've actually bought. But for instance, I did buy what was labelled as mohair, and this is what I'll never do again. Labelled as mohair, turned out to be plastic, but I got 5 25-gram balls of mohair for £1.50 from my local scrap store. So there are absolute bargains to be had, but it's only a bargain if it is what you think it is. So I've got a couple of other options for you on ways that you can get your hands on yarn. One is to look at ready-made garments or woolens in charity shops. And I'll give you, for instance, after I hit publish on the blog post, I went into one of my absolute favourite local charity shop for cashmere, and I picked up an unworn, really good quality John Lewis, which is like a fancy-ish department store in the UK. John Lewis cashmere, their cashmere is really good. It was £6. Unworn. I mean, the colour's a bit out there. It's a bit neon orange, but I love it. If I had a mind to, I could unravel that and make myself a new garment. As it is, I really like the cut and shape of the jumper that I've got. But it's more to say that you can get, it's probably about 400 to 500 grams of cashmere within that garment for £6. Obviously, it's a bargain financially. It's not a bargain in your time, because you have to be able to unseam it and carefully rip back the entire garment, wash it, get the crinkle out of it, skin it back up before you can then reuse it again. So it might be financially a good deal, but in terms of the amount of time that you're going to spend to be able to get that yarn back, to be able to make it into something else, that's where the cost is. So that's something just to be aware of. I find all sorts in charity shops though at an absolute bargain price. I've also had a cashmere jumper out of the same My Little Secret cashmere charity shop. I'm not going to tell you where I go. For £3. I've had a full cashmere jumper for £3 from there before. So you can get really decent quality wool, cashmere, natural fibres out of charity shops, unravel them and repurpose that yarn. Proper upcycling. But if you're going to look at that and it's a garment that you're buying, then what I would look is to make sure that it is in really good quality. Look for wear zones underneath the arms in particular. If there's any felting or here, then personally I wouldn't try and unravel it, because if it's been worked in the round, that means you're only getting this distance of yarn underneath the armpits before you're going to have a break in that yarn. So really, if you're looking at reusing a jumper and unraveling it, you want the jumper to be in really good condition. Otherwise, it's a lot of work and it's going to be a lot of breaks in your yarn. The other suggestion that I've got for you is to get together with your local crafting group and do a yarn swap and actually bring along yarn that you don't want anymore from your stash and see if anybody wants to swap it out with you for stuff that they don't want and have got in their stash. That can be a really good way of swapping over, getting some like joy back out of your stash, moving stuff on, getting stuff back in completely free of charge. I think what you have to be aware of with that though is that you might give stuff away and not necessarily get the same value of yarn back. But if it was something that was just going to sit in your stash anyway, going nowhere, and you get something back in that's useful, then there is value in that. But you kind of have to be prepared to let it go and not expect anything to come back in. But if you've got a really good crafting group like I have, then the chances are you're going to get something back in that you really love. This can be a really fun way of just swapping stuff around. I tend to do it every now and then with the crafting group that I run, and I'm about to do it with my guild that I'm a part of as our September meeting. So there's a whole craft swap that's going to happen. It's really easy to organise, but the main thing is if you want money for something, then label it up and tell people that you really want the money for it. You can do that too. Or if you're just willing to swap, then do that too. But it's a really fun way of kind of just moving your stash around and getting new stuff into your stash that you might be wanting to use straight away. And then the final thing that I wanted to add is if you're looking online or in store, don't just look for yarn and crafting items. Also look for finished things. This jumper that I'm wearing is like proper lace weight. I think it is a mix of alpaca and silk. I actually think it is from a brand that was called Artisano, which was UK based. But I picked this up in a vintage charity store in Barcelona called Humana. It was amazing. When I go abroad, I always go and look for really good charity shops abroad or vintage stores. I would never on my life knit a cabled lace weight alpaca silk jumper. And let me just scooch back. This has got a cabled yoke. It has cabling down at the bottom. It has cabling down the arm and round the cuff. I am never ever going to do this much knitting on a jumper, but I got this for €15. Somebody had made it. I don't think they'd ever even worn it. I think they literally cast off the jumper, tried it on, said no thank you, and put it into the charity shop. And then I bought it for €15. There's got to be at least 100 hours of work in this jumper, and I love it. Like, it's so lovely and lightweight, and it is beautifully knitted. €15. Another example for you, have a look in the accessories boxes in charity shops and thrift stores, because there's treasure in those boxes. I found a pair of proper colourwork mittens, beautifully knitted again. These were £2. They had a small coffee stain on them, which I took a punt on, thought it would probably come out, and it did. These are pure wool, £2. Again, I'm never going to have the patience to knit myself these beautiful Scandi mittens, but for £2, absolutely I'm taking them home. And if it's not handmade, then I would also say look for items that you might just wear straight away. I picked up this kind of Scottish looking big wool jumper. It's a vintage jumper, and it's got a tiny little hole in the back that I will sew, and a little bit of rework that I need to do on the collar, but that's 10-15 minutes worth of work. Originally I bought this for me, and my nephew is now going to steal it, but that's £7.49 for a wool vintage jumper that is really quite unusual, and I love it. I'm kind of gutted that my nephew's taken it, but he'll wear it more than I do. So look beyond wool in the in-store places, because there's woolen treasure to be had from other parts of the store as well. That same goes for the online places. You can get some really beautiful handmade items on the online reseller stores as well, for not dissimilar reasons to this lace weight jumper. People maybe go through the joy of knitting or crocheting something, get to the other side, they don't like what they've got, what they've made, and they pop it up for sale online. There are some beautiful shawls, hand knitted shawls on Vinted at the moment that people are selling. Worth a look. I think that sums up everything that I wanted to say, but basically there are bargains out there, whether that's online or in store. You don't have to buy brand new, you don't have to be caught up in the feverishness of the latest yarn that's come out, because there are really beautiful vintage wools yarns that are out there that you can go and buy from these spaces, and I encourage you to do so. And also, if you've never gone charity shopping abroad, this is the proof of the pudding that you can get some absolute gems and that you don't need to buy brand new. You can have a more sustainable approach and still get some of the best materials to craft with. Let me know if you've got tips that I haven't done in this video or haven't added to my blog post. I'd love to know what your tips are for getting secondhand pre-loved yarn and what you've done with it too.